We are Rogue Media Sports.
Who doesn't love a classic chocolate chip cookie? Famous Amos has been making them since the 70s, 1975 to be exact. With semi-sweet chocolate chips and a satisfying crunch, it's everything classic in one bite-sized cookie, and fans couldn't get enough. That's right. You'll find our original recipe, the one you know and love, in every bag of Famous Amos original chocolate chip cookies. Find Famous Amos anywhere you buy your favorite snacks.
Norman, we need to pause this surgery.
What, doctor?
Because Xfinity Mobile just got even better. Now you're automatically connected to Wi-Fi speeds up to a gig while you're on the go. Plus, existing Xfinity customers can buy one unlimited line and get one free for a year.
Visit XfinityMobile.com to learn more. Offer ends 6/21. Restrictions apply. Existing Xfinity Internet service and 2 new unlimited lines required. Reduced speeds after 30 gigabytes of usage per line. Data thresholds may vary. Actual Wi-Fi speeds vary, not guaranteed.
It is Matt Mosley, and it's the Doomsday Podcast alongside Ed Werder, coming to you from Frito Nation Studios. And Ed, we knew the day was coming, the big meeting. We didn't know we would have closure so quickly. And it comes down this morning, and that's why we're doing this emergency podcast. So much to get to. And also, Ed, we do want to let our folks know that as of Monday, we'll have a monster guest lined up, and we can decide whether we want to reveal that, tease it. You know, since you booked it, I think maybe I should lean on you for that. But
well, it's a bigger guest than the guy we've convened an emergency episode of the Doomsday Podcast to discuss. This person is far more accomplished than Dez Bryant, a bigger name than Dez Bryant.
Okay, but now we're not going to step all over poor Dez today, because Dez has been sent packing by the Cowboys, getting reports that as he left the room, Jerry threw up the X.
I'm reading that off your Twitter account right now, and it's quite humorous to think that Jerry would do such a thing.
Jerry
usually just says sign at the X when he's dealing with one of his coveted, high-profile, long-serving Cowboys stars. You know, really, I think the last time Jerry was in this situation was with DeMarcus Ware. DeMarcus Ware led the team in team history in sacks, but he was seen as a player who was now injury-prone, on sort of a descending trajectory, and someone they thought no longer could be an elite player. And I think many of those same things apply now to Dez Bryant as the Cowboys see him. They see him as a guy who, didn't compete for the football at times, couldn't create separation anymore, was a lazy route runner, and an incredibly expensive asset on their football team who could no longer justify their expenditure when compared to his productivity the last few years.
All right, we got a lot to go, and how does this apply to Dak Prescott? I think that's one aspect. And then where's he going to end up? Where's Dez going to end up? I've already talked to some folks in the NFC East. That's where he wants to be. Much more to come, including maybe we reveal our huge guest on Monday. Frito, would you play the music? And there it is. It is the sign. Ed, we got a huge podcast we're going to be releasing on Monday, but this felt like a time we needed to get the gang together for an emergency podcast. News coming down. We knew the meeting was going to happen today. Jerry and Dez meeting at the Star in Frisco, and then soon after that, word begins to float out. I believe Adam Schefter and others had some of these various reports that it looked like it was headed toward a release, unless there was a huge change of heart.
Well, one of the things when you're bringing in a player who's been as important in your organization's history as Dez has been in recent years, and you've decided that you're going to have a conversation with this player about cutting his salary, you've already decided that you are willing to proceed without him. Now, apparently it never got to the point where they offered him a number and said, will you play for this? And I think one of the things that complicates that option and maybe eliminated it altogether for Steven and Jerry was Dez's volatility. In a lot of situations, I think the fair thing to do when a player's not justifying his contract with his performance, as Dez has not done since he got the big money 3 years ago as a franchise player, is you can offer him a lower base salary and say, we'll let you have the opportunity to make it back through incentives. But with Dez and his behavior at times during games, which went from passion a few years ago when they were still in love with Dez to what Steven called a distraction this offseason, then you're putting him in a situation where if he's not getting the ball at a certain point in a game, he might be destructive because now it's costing him money not to get opportunities. We've already seen how he reacts to not getting opportunities when he thinks he should. Now, if he's losing money over it too, I think that could be a very detrimental situation. And that may be why ultimately they decided to just move on rather than offer him to continue playing for the Cowboys with a pay cut. But I think the thing most people believe is kind of unfair to Dez in all of this is the timing. And that's where this differs from DeMarcus Ware. DeMarcus Ware's situation, the same in many regards, but DeMarcus Ware was allowed to meet with Jerry and Steven before the start of free agency, and they didn't give him a number, I'm told. They just said, we don't think we can justify what your salary calls for in your current contract. Why don't you go out and see what you can solicit somewhere else and bring it back to us? Well, he went out to Denver, obviously, on the first flight, got the big money deal from Denver that Dallas wouldn't pay him, almost identical, and that was it. He was a former Cowboy. In this situation, Dez didn't get that opportunity, and now it's late in the game. It's not the start of free agency. The big money in free agency is largely gone, and this puts Dez in a very disadvantaged position. And if they weren't going to offer him a pay cut, I think some people think that then they should have let him go earlier in free agency, at least when they signed Allen Hurns.
Now, here's what I would say to that, and that came up on a good friend of yours. In fact, we brought you up and said kind things about you, the Cowherd show, Colin Cowherd. You've known him for years. I went on with him today, and that was one of the things. Why was this timing like it was? Why didn't they do this? Have they done Dez wrong? And I would just say this. There's a couple of things at work here. I think sometimes it takes, and we saw it with T.O. a little bit. Well, we saw it with Johnny Manziel because obviously Jerry kept talking about how he had not gone for it and how he laid up on that play, on that particular thing. I think Steven needed time.
Yep.
And maybe others in the organization, from what I've been told, I don't think Scott Linehan was probably the offense coordinator for the Cowboys, was lobbying that hard for Dez. In fact, I could probably make an argument that he was going the opposite direction. Garrett may have just not really gotten involved either way, which is sort of Garrett's way at times. But he didn't. Garrett, I didn't get the sense fought for him and said, we have to keep him. Let's not let him get away. So I think that was at play, and so the Cowboys were sitting there sort of waiting on, okay, we've got to get this timing right. We got to get Jerry to where he's comfortable doing this. And I think all of that played a role. And then it was like, well, is there any – let's go get Deontay Thompson and let's go get Allen Hurns. Did they need to wait to see if they could get adequate enough players to not replace him, but at least put themselves in a better position to release him?
Well, I think you're right in the sense of comparing the situation in many regards for different reasons. The Cowboys weren't motivated to cut Dez Bryant for the reasons they were motivated to cut Terrell Owens. They were motivated to cut Terrell Owens because he was a toxic factor in the locker room, and they had very little other alternative. But even in that case, it took, as it did in this one, it took Stephen Jones, who has a different belief system than Jerry does about, evaluation and valuation of players and the importance of team chemistry and so forth. And so, but in both situations, I think it did take Jerry a long time to come to terms with this. I think he really struggles with letting star players go. He gets incredibly close to a lot of them, especially a guy like Dez, who he drafted in the first round despite all the red flags. Took a lot of personal responsibility for helping develop him as a more mature, more professional human being, even though he's far from perfect at this point in his career. All of that took a lot of time. And I think it was Steven, again, the driving force behind leading Jerry to make the decision that Steven felt Jerry would not make if it was left to him. But I did text somebody at the Star today after this decision was made, and I asked what factors went into this decision, and the person said, ultimately, it was Jerry's decision. Now, Jerry would tell you he's a general manager. He has to sign off on all of these major personnel decisions. But I think this was really Steven's decision. He's the one who began calling the sideline outbursts something other than passion, calling them distractions. He's the one who told us in our last podcast, our exclusive interview with him, how important route running is to Dak Prescott as a quarterback. That it is important to him as it was Troy Aikman, that he's more that kind of quarterback than he is the kind of quarterback Tony Romo is, who could extend plays. And to me, when I look back at it now, at that point, I really believe Steven had already made up his mind and was really telling us, without saying as much, that Dez doesn't fit. He doesn't fit Dak because that's not the kind of receiver Dak needs.
Yeah, I think the Dak part of this, I'm glad you got there, Ed, is a huge factor. And whether it's true or not, when I've tried to look, and you do this too sometimes, Ed, what has Dak said on the record about Dez? He said something very nice. The last one I remember was a quote December 27th, which obviously was late in the regular season. He said something to the effect, I could never see him being anything else but a Dallas Cowboy. As we get into the offseason, and he's had numerous opportunities, whether it be through a golf tournament or camps and all kinds of things, there's really not been anything out there. I do think, and while I do think Dez, especially early on, enjoyed a really good relationship and had a healthy respect for Dak, I think that's going to be something you hear from Dez. And whatever interviews he does, maybe down the road, maybe not tonight, but that Dez is going to feel like Dak did not step up for him in terms of did not lobby. Now, you could make the argument on the other side, does he really have standing yet? He just finished his second year. It wasn't a great year. He didn't have the standing, obviously, that Romo had at one point. Did he have the standing to truly get in there and lobby for Dez? I think there'll be some people blamed for this by Dez, and I think Dak, for now, is going to be one of those.
Well, I think it's a good point that at a very critical juncture in the transition that this team was making from Tony Romo to, rookie and Dak Prescott, that Dez was one of those who stood behind Dak. And Dak, for whatever reason, didn't repay that in this situation. I'm not saying it's not part of his personality. I think maybe he came not to trust Dez Bryant as a receiver anymore. When you look at some of the tape and, you look at a play like that critical play in that game against Oakland early on when he throws that slant to Dez, and Dez pulls up because he knows if he catches the ball, he's going to get hit by Navarro Bowman, who's waiting on him in the middle of the field. Dez ran him into an interception in that situation. And I think plays like that definitely undermine the relationship between a quarterback and a wide receiver. And so maybe Dez was true to him, or Dak was true to himself in not advocating for Dez. Maybe he does want a different kind of receiver. Obviously, this is a very pivotal season, I think, in Dak's career, and he can't afford those receivers creating those kinds of mistakes that cost him, personally, and cost the team as well. So that may have been part of it. But the reality is, and we said, and Stephen made this point, and underlined it when he was talking about the importance of route running and that the receivers are going to be held accountable for properly running routes because that's what this quarterback needs. Well, let's just take a quick look at the numbers. And, since this quarterback change was made from Tony Romo to Dez Bryant, where Dez was clearly one of the best receivers in football early in his career with Romo throwing it to him, Dak's career completion percentage by wide receiver completed 52% of all the passes that he threw to Dez. He completed 68% of all the passes he threw to other receivers. Now, obviously, some of those are running backs. Some of those are, tight end, Jason Witten type throws that are not as difficult. But I think it became pretty clear that these two had a really hard time matching their strengths as quarterback and wide receiver. And I think Dez stopped fighting for the ball in a lot of situations, and ultimately that may have cost him the allegiance he had early on with Dak.
You know, we remember in the aftermath of the T.O. years, there were receivers like Miles Austin. He was coming up at the time, and then obviously his career was able to kind of take off without T.O. there. LaRon Robinson actually put up huge numbers with Tony. I think Tony was able, and to this day, I don't think Tony has said anything disparaging about T.O., but Tony was able to kind of breathe again. I mean, it is when there's that huge of a figure in the locker room or that huge of a personality, and you're going to see it today, Ed. We've already seen it from some of the tweets from the players. Taco Charlton's new to this team. He's going into his second year, and he's quoted in his tweet, he says something about, "This is BS." I mean, there were a lot of fans of Dez. Dez is a very popular guy in that room. And so now this is something Dez pointed to. I was going to read this. This comes from Jerry's release. And when somebody put this out, Dez has been very busy on Twitter today. When someone tweeted this aspect of the statement out, Jerry's statement, Dez put whatever the eyeball icon emoji is or whatever and kind of pointed like, you're onto something here. "We arrived at this crossroad collectively, with input from several voices within the organization. Ultimately, we determined it was time to go in a new direction." Now, this is one of those interesting things. I think people like T.O. and Dez and others over the years have an incredibly difficult time. Jerry has had such a paternal-type relationship with them that it's hard to sit there and go, Jerry doesn't want me anymore? So, in a sense, when you see these words, that's the first thing I noticed Dez kind of clung on to. Dez will, till the day he retires, or he dies maybe, which is hopefully many, many years from now, will believe that it was other people who got Jerry's attention, and Jerry didn't really want this to happen.
And Jerry's basically making that point. It's very rare. I can't remember another situation. And Jerry's, let's be honest, Jerry released Troy Aikman, Jerry released Michael Irvin, Jerry released Emmitt Smith, Jerry released Jimmy Johnson, Jerry relieved Tex Schramm and Tom Landry, and in no other situation of that magnitude can I recall Jerry specifically basically saying there was some disagreement on all of this, and this really kind of goes against my instinct, but I was talked into this by others, which is what he essentially says here today. And remember when they drafted Dez, you know, they provided somebody to live with him and sort of keep an eye on him and make sure that he was where he was supposed to be. There was even, reports that Jerry was managing his money, that Jerry had control of Dez's checkbook at times. So they did have a unique relationship, even though Jerry tends to get very close to a lot of his high-profile players. But
I would like to give Jerry a chance to do that for me. I really would. I mean, just given my track record.
I think you have, and he's declined, thinking the job is much too big even for him.
That's true.
But, I think another thing that we need to get into beyond where's Dez go next is what are the salary cap ramifications of this, which were a big motivating factor for the Cowboys. And it's interesting to me that they have not designated him a June 1 cut. So that would indicate that they're taking the entire cap hit now. That's $8.5 million, which is a very significant amount because they still are being charged for Tony Romo a similar amount. And this is that period of time when the Cowboys are supposed to have the greatest possible advantage in building a Super Bowl quality team, which Stephen Jones told us that's their goal, and they believe they're close to that, to take advantage of the fact that Dak and Ezekiel Elliott are still in their first contracts, so they're dramatically underpaid and their salary cap charges are very minimal compared to their impact on the team. When they have to start paying Dak like a starting quarterback and they have to start paying Ezekiel Elliott like an elite running back, that's when it's really going to get tricky. Well, the fact that they're adding $8.5 million in dead money on top of the $8.5 million of Romo dead money means the Cowboys have the second most dead money in the entire NFL. So clearly they're not going to be in a position to go out and sign any more wide receivers. Whatever help they get, the replacement in all likelihood for Dez Bryant is either going to be Alan Hearns, whose numbers are quite similar over the past few years, quite honestly, to Dez Bryant's. But that's Dez playing poorly. That's Dez playing badly enough the Cowboys don't want him on the roster anymore. So now they pretty much sent a message to everybody in the NFL when the draft is unraveling next week that if there's a receiver you want to go up and get, you better go get him in front of the Cowboys because the Cowboys need a starting caliber receiver in the first or second round of this draft.
And that's one of the goals as we continue the Doomsday podcast, Ed. I'm going to, in our huge guest, and we'll reveal that to you in a few minutes here. I'll leave that up to you, Ed. I mean, that's one of the things I want to talk about is now you put extreme pressure on yourselves. You always say we want to take the best player available. Well, with this receiving core right now, if you come out of this draft without a first or second round wide receiver, it's going to feel like a failure. And boy, Ed, you've done some homework here. I'm looking at your wide receiver depth chart right now for the Cowboys, and it's not going to bowl anyone over. Read that real quick. That is I'm trying to think if I agree with how you.
I would say Allen Hurns is their number one receiver now, but Terrence Williams is the other outside receiver. Then they have Cole Beasley. They have Deontay Thompson, who's a speed guy that they signed in free agency, and they have Ryan Switzer, who they drafted last year, whose only real impact was on special teams. So that's the list of receivers that they have right now. It's interesting to note that they had pre-draft visits with a number of the top receivers in the draft, including Alabama's Calvin Ridley and Maryland's DJ Moore. I believe they went to LSU the other day and looked at the top receiving prospect there. But again, they've kind of tipped their hand here that they need early in this draft, either in the first or second round, they need a starting caliber player at that position.
Yeah, they've put themselves in an interesting spot here for sure. And just for further context, Ed, to what you were talking about, I believe if they had done that post-June 1st cut and had designated Dez as that, it would have been somewhere around $12 million they could have saved against the cap. By taking this immediately, it's the $8 million which you were referring to. Now, technically, I do think they have a little wiggle room if there was somebody out there. I mean, it's not like there's flushed with wide receivers out there. They could maybe go find somebody, but I think you're right. I think the draft is where the focus has to be. Now, this list, and I saw this same tweet that talks about all these veterans that were out there. Well, I think the Cowboys will see what they can do in the draft, and then they may go to camp, Ed, still thinking in the back of their minds, we're going to have to see who gets cut during training camp and may have to bring a veteran wide receiver in or something like that. Now, one thing I wanted to talk with you about, and I've been making some calls on this front. Where is Dez Bryant going to end up? And I believe, and he said already on Twitter, oh boy, if you want to know what Dez is thinking, just kind of follow his Twitter timeline. He would love to get with one of these NFC East teams. Now, the problem is, you got the defending Super Bowl champions. I mean, it's not like they're hurting at wide receiver. I reached out to the Eagles and was I immediately got a response that just said, we have Alshon Jeffrey, basically meaning we have a guy who does what you would want Dez to do.
I got a similar response from a different person in the Eagles organization that reflected at this time they have very little interest in Dez Bryant.
Okay.
And it's worth noting because Philadelphia would have a positive impression of him based on the 13 games he played against them in a Cowboys uniform where he averaged 5 receptions, 15.2 per catch, and had 9 touchdowns in 13 games against the Eagles. Another team that he had great success against in the division, he's played 14 games against the Redskins, averaged 14.5 yards per catch, and has 8 touchdowns. So the Redskins would seem to have more of a need for a wide receiver
certainly
than would.
Although just for pure entertainment, Odell Beckham Jr. and Dez playing together would be a lot of fun. I'd like to see the Giants. I think the Giants are probably at a point where they've got enough concerns with perhaps drafting the replacement for Eli Manning and deciding what's going to get Dez. But boy, back to our original point, one of the many salient points we've brought up is what the timing on releasing him. It does put him in a bind, no matter what the reasoning is. And you can say, well, they had to talk Jerry into it or whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it might make Dez feel better that, Jerry didn't really want to release me. That's fine. And I think, Jerry's great at sort of creating those things where nobody ever gets mad at him. They get mad at other people. I've had bosses like that. I've been in relationships like that. Yeah.
When this happened to me, I just get mad at everybody involved.
You do.
Everybody
You
who's
do.
still at the company I left.
Exactly. They're
complicit.
all
complicit.
They're all
on
the
hit
enemy.
list.
I'm with you. Except there are certain people in the field I think that you're okay
Yes.
with. Like Mort.
It's taken me a year. But, Morton is instantly forgiven. Had nothing to do with
yeah,
this.
that's
Would've
right.
saved me if he could have.
He tried a few times over the years. Okay, Ed, I just want to I want to get to this point though. Also, enormous podcast coming up that we're going to talk about draft. We're still going to be talking about Dez. Are you ready to share who you booked for Monday's program? I mean, I think we'll be taping this on Sunday. Are you willing to share this with us?
I think now's the right time for that reveal. And I think you made the comment that you think this is the biggest guest we've ever had. You said that on Twitter. And I think we're having our good friend Chris draw this particular guest. Is that
Chris Morris is in the
drawing?
middle right now of one of his unbelievable sketches or
Of this
drawings.
guest?
Yes.
So I'm as curious as I always am to see what these guests have to say. I'm just as interested to see how Chris decides to depict the person and which particular outstanding feature he will exaggerate and do so laughably, like he did with me, my teeth. Bigger than John Elway's. Anyway, we all know that's not true. Anyway, so our next guest for the Doomsday podcast, at this moment, free of charge, I've been told that this person will donate their guest fee to charity, which is very noble of this person. Our guest has won multiple Super Bowls. Now, we've had Brett Favre on. I think Brett Favre...
Just one Super Bowl for him.
One Super Bowl. He's played in 2, he won 1. This guy's won 3. Our guest is going to be Troy Aikman. And I think one of the really unique things about having Troy Aikman on at this time is he's going to be working the draft for the first time since he drafted David LaFleur. I say that sarcastically because Troy gets blamed for that a lot. Anyway, he is going to be working the first round at Jerry World or on the set for Fox. Evaluating all of these quarterbacks. This could be a record year for quarterbacks going in the high first round. Could be the first time they're the first 4 picks. And Fox wisely has this enormous asset in Troy Aikman, who does games for them. So he sees a lot of quarterbacks. He's gone out for some of the quarterbacks' pro days, traveled for them. I believe he's now been at more pro days than Jerry Jones has been at, which is not a hard number to overcome. But Troy Aikman will be our guest on Sunday, and we'll get to talk to him about his perceptions of the Dez Bryant move, the Dak Prescott's future, and as well as who does he think is the top quarterback in this draft. He obviously went to Oklahoma early in his career. Baker Mayfield went to Oklahoma. He was drafted as a number 1 pick in 1989 as a quarterback out of UCLA. Josh Rosen may be the number 1 quarterback prospect in this draft. So I think Troy will impart much wisdom on Sunday.
I want to ask
Which means
him,
we have to impart far less.
Yeah.
Which is always puts me in a more comfortable situation.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. I want to ask Troy if he ever asked Jerry to release Michael Irvin.
I don't think Michael ever went across the middle and turned down a catch to avoid a hit. I think Michael's thing used to be, I trade concussions for receptions. That's what he used to say. Dez stopped making that deal at some point last year.
Michael might rethink that now. But
one other thing, I don't know if I think we're coming to a conclusion here. One other thing I wanted to say as we try and justify or explain the rationale for the Cowboys in making this move with Dez Bryant and how much he'll appeal to other teams in the NFL as he resumes his career and kind of at what financial level. One source of the Cowboys told me that, quote, he has slipped a lot in recent years. And I don't think they meant his footing was bad. I think they meant that, his play has begun to deteriorate in many different regards. He had the worst catch percentage in the entire league last year. By some measure, he led the NFL in drop passes last year. And, a lot of people obviously want to blame Dak Prescott for a lot of that, given how successful Dez was when he played with Tony Romo, who a much more prolific and accomplished passer at the end of his career than Dak Prescott is right now. And maybe Dak will never be that kind of quarterback. But obviously the Cowboys put a lot of the blame for the failure of the offense and the passing game in particular on Dez Bryant with this move to release him today.
Yeah. And just for some perspective, I've noticed you brought up and others, when they, when Dorsett was traded, when Emmett was released, when Troy was released. I mean, these things happen to legendary type players in this franchise. But this to me feels so different than even when they released T.O. This is a beloved player by many. And, I mean, when you go to the Cowboy Stadium and who's wearing what number? I mean, 88, the Dez Bryant number, I think, has as many as anybody.
Well, look at the legacy of that number. And he lived up to it.
For a good while.
Drew Pearson, Michael Irvin, and
but
Dez
this is
Bryant.
happening at age 29 when those other players still had a lot left in the tank. Mm-hmm. And so this is fascinating to watch.
And receivers at 29 don't generally lose it like running backs do, right?
That's true.
And I think that's happened here. I think Dez has said he's going to be, exceptionally motivated now that he's had this experience. Whether athletically and physically he's able to use that to his advantage, as he's suggesting rhetorically, remains to be seen. But it's kind of amazing that, 3 years ago, people were talking about Tony Romo, Dez Bryant, and DeMarco Murray. They're the next triplets. They're the next Aikman, Irvin, and Smith. And obviously that was laughably premature because their careers are all over in Dallas now. And Romo's career in the NFL is over, and they never even got to a championship game, much less won 3 Super Bowl rings.
I would say this. I like, and I've thrown this out before today, a few weeks ago, the Patriots, and I've seen some people already have written this today, the Patriots are somewhere I would look for Dez. And the thought would be sort of like Randy Moss late in his career. You capitalize on a player that might have 1 or 2 seasons left of somewhat elite type numbers. Now, it's been a while for Dez, but with Tom Brady, with Belichick, with that system, I don't know if Dez would enjoy his time that much. But he certainly...
Yeah, but here's why I don't think he's a good fit there. Not only is he a big money guy at a position where they just have made substantial cuts in that regard, but, the Patriot profile under Bill Belichick for a player is tough, smart, and versatile, and I don't think that Dez fits all 3 of those criteria based on what we know right now because... he wasn't physical in recent years. I know he's been injured. I know he's played hurt. I give him credit for that. And I'm with you. I think anybody who believes that this guy's disruptive in the locker room is wrong. The guy has a great passion for football. I have seen him out there myself when I've come in after the Monday after a loss, and he's the highest profile guy who makes himself available, and he's always been, accountable publicly for his own failings, and so I give him a lot of credit for that. But I just don't think he really fits the Patriots because he's not a guy who can play a lot of different positions. He has always been seen by Cowboy coaches as a guy, because people would always say, why don't you play him in the slot? Why don't you get him on the move? Why can't he play if he's been injured, coming off an injury? And it's because he's a guy who has always needed a full week of reps at the position and in the role he's going to play for him to be able to execute a game on Sunday.
I agree. I agree with a lot of that. Ed, it's been good to have you in here for an emergency podcast. I want to also reveal a little bit of good news. It looks like we're closing in on a presenting sponsor for our draft coverage and maybe even our coverage all through the season. And I'm not allowed. It's a car dealership company. It's a company that does a lot of things, and so I'm not allowed to say. But I'm excited, and if I'm just saying, Ed, let me just put it this way. If you had a chance to say nice things about Warren Buffett, now would be a good time.
Isn't Dez his guy?
Huh?
Isn't Dez his guy?
Dez? Warren Buffett? I don't know of any connection between those two. But I've just always been a fan of the Berkshire Hathaway Automotive Group. Ed, there it is, man. This is an exciting time for the podcast, for Frito Nation Productions, as Frito continues to grow his empire. And then we'll all do it again on Sunday, and we get together and visit with another huge guest. Whether he's the biggest ever, who knows? That's debatable. Certainly, you could make that argument.
I can't wait till you get a guy of this magnitude.
Troy Aikman. I got Mike McIntyre, I think. He was pretty big.
Jalen Smith.
Jalen Smith, I got him. Troy Aikman joins us, and that will air probably Monday morning. For everyone who's been a part of this, for Frito Nation Productions, and the entire staff at Doomsday, I want to say good night. Say good night, Ed.
Good night on this Doomsday for Dez special podcast.
Later.
Stockings have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now. You don't see them anymore. This year will not be like the ones before.
Who doesn't love a classic chocolate chip cookie? Famous Amos has been making them since the 70s, 1975 to be exact. With semi-sweet chocolate chips and a satisfying crunch, it's everything classic in one bite-sized cookie, and fans couldn't get enough. That's right. You'll find our original recipe, the one you know and love, in every bag of Famous Amos original chocolate chip cookies. Find Famous Amos anywhere you buy your favorite snacks.
Norman, we need to pause this surgery.
What, doctor?
Because Xfinity Mobile just got even better. Now you're automatically connected to Wi-Fi speeds up to a gig while you're on the go. Plus, existing Xfinity customers can buy one unlimited line and get one free for a year.
Visit XfinityMobile.com to learn more. Offer ends 6/21. Restrictions apply. Existing Xfinity Internet service and 2 new unlimited lines required. Reduced speeds after 30 gigabytes of usage per line. Data thresholds may vary. Actual Wi-Fi speeds vary, not guaranteed.